So good morning, everybody. It's so delightful to be here this morning. And so the three of us, Mr. Chow from EY, Mr. James Lai from IoT Association Malaysia, we have the responsibility for keeping you engaged and occupied throughout lunch.
Thank you.
So we've got two very incredible sessions this morning. I certainly was enlightened. We had the Minister of Multimedia and Communications talk about the importance of the trajectory that we're on from here on. Very important. And we spent a lot of that time talking about infrastructure. And when I think about infrastructure, when I think about digital economy, when you think about 4IR, all the things that we'll be talking about today, certainly that is the foundation.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we think about, so we talked about that. We had a very robust panel, the one prior to this, talking about 5G specifically. But now we have the responsibility now of having a discussion around, now what?
Okay.
So when I think about digital economy, of course you need infrastructure, but you also need digitally skilled Malaysians, digitally empowered businesses, and continued digital investments. Ultimately, what are we trying to do? Increase the know-how and also increase the velocity of business. And most importantly, sustainability of all of that. So over the next hour, we'll be having a brief chat about that. But before we kick off, for the benefit of those tuning in and those who might have missed some of the dialogue this morning, I would just share some of the key takeaways from this morning. When we talked about infrastructure, everybody, if you haven't heard about Jendela, that is the new buzzword. Jendela talks about the path that we'll be building out the foundation of infrastructure. But the main thing there is the whole notion of telecommunications, i.e. connectivity, as a utility. And then, which ultimately the first panel said, it's all about giving consumers choices. Because they don't really care, is it 4G or 3G or 5G or speed, it's just, they just want connectivity. So that was one of the key takeaways from the panel, the first panel. The second panel, I thought was interesting. The part that resonated was when Elbrand said, hey, so the telcos, we're just building the infrastructure. Actually, in the end of it, industry, i.e. business, will need to drive the application of that. So that's what we're going to focus our conversation on from here on.
Very good.
So I'm going to kick it off with you, Mr. Chow.
Okay.
Because I know you and many like you have been extremely busy since the beginning of the year, primarily since March 18th, which I'm sure your phone was ringing off the hook because clients were calling you when they're faced with this unprecedented situation called COVID. So maybe talk to us a little bit and share, as it relates to technology, as it relates to business in general, before, what was that like?
Right.
And then after, what were people calling you about and talking and getting advice on? Because part of the theme of our conversation this morning is about embracing the changes from COVID-19. So I'll start with that.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you, Tan Sri Wahid, Dato' Umar, for inviting. This is a real new experience for me doing this webinar, and both hybrid, physical, and online. But it's really interesting. So maybe I could categorize that into about 3 areas, Surina, before COVID and after COVID started. Number 1, businesses that are not online, they cannot sell nor serve their customers. So a big, huge drop in revenue. So I would say that as a category of losers. Then there's another category that is, like you say, phone ringing off the hook, demand, difficult to cope. I think telecommunication business, whom we had just now, is one of them. E-commerce platform. My wife was totally transformed, Tan Sri. Before this, she really hated shopping online. But now her favorite time of shopping is before she goes to sleep. After clearing all the things, she lies down and she just... So the big shift is some winners and some losers. And I would categorize them as some industries that are more winners type, e-commerce, telecommunication, healthcare, some of the F&B staff. Some of the losers, unfortunately, the hospitality, transportation, and because of that, oil and gas. But also within sectors, I would see some winners and some losers, Puan. The winners are those who are bold. The winners are those who have already started the digital journey. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, I think the proportion is not enough to create that critical mass. And I remember the days when we had first fax machine, or I remember the day when I had my first email address. I was so happy and proud. But the problem was, not many of my friends have email addresses, and therefore you are nicely dressed but nowhere to go. I think the same for us in Malaysia. We need to take the next step. But coming back to your question, the biggest change, winners and losers, and within even sectors, there are winners and losers. And the winners are the ones who's connected, who are willing to change, and has already been in the digital space.
Thank you. James, so from your side, so tell us a little bit more about IoT Association, what sort of companies you have in there. I would imagine a lot of them are SMEs. And then from your standpoint, what was it like for them as they was navigating this sudden change?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tan Sri and Macquarie for inviting me. So basically, Malaysia IoT Association, MIOTA, we are actually a very young association. We actually just celebrated our 4th year. We were founded in 2016. Currently about 70 plus membership. So in fact, one of our members was a first panelist, TM1, right? One of our members. Mimos is our member. We also have multinationals like Lenovo, AMD, HP Enterprise, SMEs, and also manufacturing companies. So in terms of the questions on, obviously, this pandemic hit everyone very suddenly at a very fast pace, right? I think a lot of the questions I get from members is that, again, we are not allowed to work, right? The whole supply chain is being disrupted. So we have members, SME and startup, who actually create IoT devices, are not able to procure the parts, right? Especially from other countries, or within the supply chain, right? I think the government have done a very good job, right, in coming out with policy, especially MCO, right? Obviously, the urgency to protect the health of the rakyat, right? I think along the way, a lot of our members are in, again, tech companies, right? They either been exposed to using cloud computing, right, IoT, in the applications. So a lot of our members did not have that, drastic change, right, like retail or hotel industries, right? They are still doing business, but it's being disrupted. There is acceleration of adoption of all these technologies that have been using before at a much faster rate, right? We have members that actually facing issues where their employees have to get new laptops, right? Because they need to run the latest, web conferencing tools and things like that. And I think you're talking about infrastructure. I think because of work from home, right, from the MCO, the users of infrastructure is spread out, right? We used to go to the office in KL or Cyberjaya, right, to work, right? We get very good connectivity. Once we have employees working from home, right, again, you heard stories of the young lady who had to climb trees to get coverage, right? I think in Malaysia, this has, with the pandemic, this has even accelerated these issues on coverage, right? And we see also a lot of, during the MCO, a lot of our members actually introduce or have even accelerated sales of technologies. For example, end of April, we actually had our first webinar. We used to have live events. We kind of have live events. We have webinar, pretty successful. We have members coming in to talk about facial recognition technologies, thermal scanners, and it seems that it becomes ubiquitous. Every building we have, right? We have facial scanners, thermal scanners. And in fact, one of the members was showing their AI for facial recognition can recognize your face with the mask, right? I think they're having a rate of about 80%, which is pretty good, right?
So,
Yeah.
so it sounds to me, and I can tell by the experience that we went through, COVID was a necessary push
Absolutely.
for people.
Absolutely. Big game changer.
Game changer in that regard. And to a large extent, if you're in the digital development business as I'm in right now, it's a welcome change because now we've somewhat increased the confidence of businesses to take that first step, to try. What we saw, and I'm sure you saw the same thing, things like remote working.
Absolutely.
And so where companies and businesses and consumers are really have really taken that step, if you will. So coming back to you, so we talked about winners and losers,
Right.
different industries, no doubt. So when we talk about navigating this change, share with us a little bit more, the kinds of questions that you would get from companies, from boards, from management, from leadership when they were suddenly faced with this unprecedented scenario, and now they know, oh, we live in we like to call it at MDEC, in a digital by default world now.
Absolutely.
And so what was that like, and what sort of questions, and how were people thinking about things?
Before COVID, I must say, going around to clients, especially boards, and try to make them, help them to make decisions regarding digital and all that, it was much more difficult. I remember presenting to a board of a bank at a retreat, and the struggles of trying to explain to them the difference in customer service. That has changed. But I think, and I wish Malaysian organizations are jumping faster. They are not. So I guess the questions are still the same. If I invest, what kind of returns can I get, and when can I get it? So our conversations now are shifting to shorter time cycle. Previously, you may take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to get a system up. We are proposing 2 weeks, 3 weeks agile sprint to get something so that you can see. So that is being seen to be more successful, because I think clients are still, the struggle is, when will this end? So because of that, do I hold on to cash, or do I invest in projects like this, especially in projects that I'm not sure of the outcome. So therefore, shorter time scale, smaller, but you get results faster. And so the agile sprint approach, every 2 weeks you get to see something. So those are the conversations that we are seeing more and more. But I'm really grateful. Just now the announcement by YB Minister, there'll be an announcement coming up in September. That's very good, because we need clarity. And that's what a lot of industry players are asking for now. Give us clarity. Tak apa lah, whatever you decide. Data sovereignty, data residency, data localization. As long as you make the decision, then I think the private sector knows how to adapt to it. So decisions like that. I'm also very glad to read about Jendela and the platform and all that's been developed. So I think those clarity will help. And I think from my perspective, the private sector needs to take the first step, the first bold step, and just try it and move forward.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Sounds like what you were saying just now is really the where we are right now in this digital by default world is really all about accelerating.
Yes.
How do we actually accelerate? How do we accelerate the execution? One of the things that we talked about in the first panel, in Jendela in particular, yes, we've been talking about plans and whatnot, but with the difference that we're at right now, the telco operators talked about the National Digital Infrastructure Lab, in which case they really got granular.
That's right.
Really got granular in terms of the execution. So that was one theme. And then the other theme that they talked about also was not only do you get granular in terms of execution, it's the collaboration that needs to happen as well. So it's breaking the silos, and it's really getting things done. So I'll get to you, but the next question also. So you talked just now about clarity, and we talked about soon we'll be announcing. We've been working very hard on the blueprint, the master plan, the plan going forward. Many of us, not just MDEC, but it's been across collaboration across ministries and industries. So when you think about the path forward, we talked this morning about infrastructure. Now, as it relates to the other components, talent, the businesses, investments. What do you think is required from a macro standpoint for the country to really move the needle from here on? You talked about execution and acceleration,
right.
but what else? And I'd love your thoughts on that as well.
Sure. I think, as mentioned just now, the infrastructure is the platform, right? Is the base that people can work on, and that's very important. I think the next part of it, I think mentioned by some of the panelists in the previous discussion, was applications. And applications require both innovation, people to be able to adapt, but you also need to have a market. No point being creative and innovative if there's no market. I think, therefore, maybe 2 or 3 components. One key component from a recent work that we've done is government needs to be a catalyst. So when we talk about digital government services, we saw that in China, we saw that in India, we saw that in Australia, we saw that in Singapore, where the government try and digitize its processes, make it simpler. One big change that India did was the application for new businesses. It cut down to 2 or 3 months. And I think that's an area that we can work on. So one is getting the government being a catalyst to embark on that journey and look at things like data sharing. The other part that I think a big chunk of players would be the business side, and that would be the SMEs. We need to get the SMEs on board. Make it simple for the SMEs, create a lot of incentive. In fact, when we spoke to a number of technology players, they are willing to provide that service for free to help Malaysian SMEs on board. And I've spoken to some banks and telcos, they are willing to work with their clients because they recognize if, number satu, if the customers do not come on board, they'll be lost in the new world.
Yes.
Their lunches will be eaten by competition around in the neighboring countries. So for them to survive, for the Malaysian economy to survive, their customers must come on board. So I think these 2 components is needed. And then on top of that is then helping Malaysians make that journey about the workforce. Maybe I can address that later on.
So on the SME side, and many of your members are SMEs, so a couple of quick observations. So you mentioned just now, you talked about how companies, big companies are realizing that small companies are the customers, and so we want to enable and nurture that, provide know-how to that. That's certainly something that we've seen. From an MDEC standpoint, we're working very, very closely with the telcos. We've got MOUs with almost all the telcos now. In terms of helping to provide know-how to the SMEs. 2 weeks ago, for example, we held our very first SME Digital Summit, which was which I'd like to talk about because of the fact that as part of this, 60 industry partners came together. 60 industry partners, it's everyone from the telcos to big tech to even like small digital marketing agencies came together to help impart knowledge to SMEs. And fortunately, alhamdulillah, we had a pretty wide reach of almost close to 1 million people.
Fantastic.
And so I wanted to share, we did a survey, and I wanted to share some of the takeaways from the poll that we did during that part. So what we discovered, and of course this is more skewed towards service sector because that was a primary target audience then. So 81% of the SMEs have started establishing their digital presence. And digital presence, we just define it as so long as you've got something online. It could just be a Instagram page or it could be a website. So they've started, out of which, but only 17% have got digital payments established. Because when we talk about the digital journey, so you have to start with being discoverable,
right.
Then you have to start with being able to do commerce.
Right.
Online. So only 17% have already utilized digital payment gateways and yet to go on that path. But the good news is that of that 81%, 43% have already kick-started their digital journey, and 36 are already starting to sell online. So we're building up this momentum. So on your side, from your the members of the IIT Association, the SMEs that you see, what are some examples that you've seen? Are you seeing the same sort of momentum pick up?
Well, most of our members are doing B2B. right? Some of our members like Lenovo, they have a wide, e-commerce shop presence. Obviously, they are doing better because of the pandemic, right? More people are buying laptops, cloud services, and so forth. In terms of the pickup, it really accelerated, right? Again, that's a balance. We have a group of industries like retail, tourism, or even airlines, right? I have a friend who's a pilot. He haven't been flying for 6 months, right? They are themselves dabbling in e-commerce, right? A lot of housewives, right, selling through Facebook, WhatsApp, things like that. That has been accelerated. In terms of, I think a panelist mentioned before, the wife have not bought anything online, are started to buy online. Not because they want to, because they have to. The markets are not open, right? I think if this happens, this is, again, as mentioned, we are jumping to the cliff, right? In terms of how our members are experiencing it, a lot of are doing better, right? A lot of trying to grasp of what's going on, right? We actually have a member called iPod. If you notice in KLIA airport, they have smart vending machines, right? I think they were trying to bridge between like physical to virtual, right? You were in another country, you use their app, you order, you come to the smart vending machine, you just take your products there, right? Again, obviously, because they have a online presence, right? Again, nobody is taking stuff outside from the vending machine. They still have the online presence, right? I think this also can leverage off because now people do not want to go to a particular, place to get to interact with a human being to get the food or products. They can just go to the vending machine, right? In fact, some of the vending machines are fitted with UV lights to desanitize the products. They can go to that. In fact, I think major companies like Alibaba, right? They used to have their the Hermo stores, right, where people can look at the products before they buy online. I think this is happening also, right? Shopping complexes, I think I went to Mid Valley yesterday, it's crowded, right? People are still going there, look at the products, but they will go back at home and place order online.
Yeah, so I think we're certainly positioning ourselves to be, it's a hybrid model where it's online and offline.
Absolutely.
So people want to see and touch, but then they want the convenience of just buying it online at home.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about because you talked about winners and losers,
Yes.
and certainly because the large audience that's watching and tuning in, I bet you there's a bunch of equity analysts as well. And so when you're trying to identify the winners, so companies that are actually, embracing this change very well and really positioning themselves to thrive in this new era of the fourth industrial revolution, what are some of the characteristics of these digital champions or tech champions, if you will, or innovation champions? Maybe we can talk about, you can characterize, board level. I mean, like, so some are the larger enterprises, and maybe James, you can talk about like some of the smaller companies, the SMEs.
Sure. So I think one is by sector. I just saw the newspaper this morning about the pharmaceutical sector will be picking up, of course, rubber glove, etc. So one is by sector. The other one is within the sectors, like I mentioned, even sectors like, say, property sector. One has to understand the thinking of the board and the leadership. How forward-looking are they? How well they're positioning their products. Back to your point, I think, for me, I've been to a bank branch for many, many moons, because when the internet banking started, I haven't gone, and I don't think I'll be going back very soon. So I think back to the example just now, for someone who's now experienced online shopping, I don't think they'll rush very soon to go back to normal shopping. So I think therefore there's certain trends that will stay on even beyond this new normal. So I would look at boards and leadership of organizations that are forward-looking, that have got very clear thinking around what they are digitizing. So there are two components of digitizing. One is internal processes to reduce cost and to be more accurate, more precise in their processes. I've got an example of a client in a very traditional business called plantation. And what they do is they add bleaches to the whole process to clean the oil. And before this, they were agak-agak lah,
Yeah.
based on experience, agak-agak. So the agak-agak one is good, but depends if the person who does the agak-agak don't come to work, get sick, get run over by a lorry, who's going to do the agak-agak? Agak means estimation. So if you use IoT today with a sensor, you can actually even consider the temperature, the oil, the quality of the oil to determine the amount of bleaches to precise number, right? And therefore, the quality of oil produced, the number of wastage is reduced. So all this helps. So the question I have for equities investors is, knowing the board and the management, how clear are they, how they're using this in digitizing their internal processes, as well as how are they interacting with their customers, whether it's servicing or selling, etc., etc. I think those will be my major points that I look at.
Well, I think certainly with the pandemic, right, a lot of people are looking more seriously into IoT, especially the combination with AI and certainly 5G, right? I think earlier the chairman, Dr. Falun, was talking about, again, is standing here, and people are not interested in the temperature or the environment, right? So like, I disagree with that, right? Technically, with IoT, you could have sensors mounted to know what's the humidity, temperature, and also airflow of the room, right? Think about it, right? With COVID happening, right, you want to know where is the most safest place to sit in this room, right? Based on the airflow, temperature, humidity, right? And a startup could just came out with an app that connects to the sensors and provide you a service, right? A COVID safety location service, right? Again, we've seen drones. I think one of our members are actually doing drone applications, right? They're actually using drones for delivery, right? I think there's a startup in Cyberjaya that has a robo car that drives to the food truck, pick up the food and drives to. They're actually doing pilots right now, so that is doing. And in fact, that startup has changing from food delivery service to automated sanitization. So they have the same robot going around, spraying sanitizing liquid in the area. And it could be bundled as an app and sold as a service, right? So we see a lot of new innovation picking them up at a faster pace with coming out of the fourth industrial revolution, all the introduction of AI, IoT, nanotechnology, and things like that. It will change the way we work, right? Play, change the way consumers consumes products, services, and produces products and services.
Yeah.
So I like to also think of it as this. Sometimes when we have this conversation about tech, digital, you start to hear all the big words, right? Like AI, drones, all these things. But ultimately, you talk about like strategy. It is how do you leverage all of this to make sure that we deliver better, faster, cheaper.
Absolutely.
And so if you don't get lost in like whatever it is that you do, it's always all about better, faster, cheaper, and a better overall customer experience. I think companies that get that will really be poised to be on their merry way from here on. I want to segment and talk about the talent component. Because to do all these things that we talked about, even this morning when we talk about building out the infrastructure and whatnot, it still requires the people. People to execute, people to get into the details, people to roll up their sleeve, people to think differently, leaders that think differently, boards that think differently. So it's all about this talent component. And so, Mr. Chow, what is your take on that? From a talent standpoint, where are we? And how should we be thinking about the talent component?
Okay. So I'll split this into two, right? Those who are now in the working world and those who are still schooling. Let's talk about the working world. I have a concern actually. And the concern is this, I've been working with a number of clients because of the COVID-19 situation, they will reduce employment. They will. No chance of proceeding without doing that. My concern, are Malaysians displaced of work, not ready to go on to the next wave, which is the digital revolution. But at the same time, if we implement what we're going to implement, we need a lot of skills. And at the moment, we probably need to import them. So you'll have a situation we need to import some skills, and at the same time, Malaysians not able to go on the journey. So the hope is we need a solution that can help to reskill. I know the Penjana has a couple of incentives, which is good. I think we need to tighten that and connect the reskilling program to placement. Because my concern is also that a lot of people coming out with training, but training for the sake of training, but we need to help them to be placed. I think one very good example is the Singapore Skills of the Future program. The firm has a chance to work with them. And what they've done is they go industry by industry, identifying what jobs will change, by banks, insurance companies, by sector, what jobs will change, what jobs will no longer be relevant. And the question, more important question to me, is each individual, each job, what are the 2 or 3 or 4 skills they need to gain for them to be employed again, whether within the banking sector or another sector. So they have gone down to very granular. I think that's what we need.
Yeah, so the good news is that we're on that path.
Okay, good.
So in Penjana, for example, 2 billion worth of investment into things that relate to skill and reskilling. And then as part of that, even when you look at some of the incentives, some of the programs that HRDF has, it is really taking an approach of its place and train. Perkeso certainly as well. And in fact, last week, just plug again, we organized the My Digital Workforce Week, which is really talking about a lot of these things. I'll touch on for 1 second because you talked about jobs. And so it's true, when we think forward, there will be this displacement in terms of shifting skills, but there are jobs that are out there right now. For example, one of the things that the government has now is a portal called My Future Jobs, which is this one-stop that consolidates everything. So since it was launched in June or so, 200,000 jobs are on there right now, and about 10% of them are actually digital-related jobs. And so that should hope to catalyze some of these things. But I do take your point. It really is all about skills now. I think when we think about future, it is this whole new notion of how do you continue to skills.
Is that going by sector? Because I think we need to help the sector to deal with the issues because different sectors have got different impact.
Yes, that part I agree. I think at this stage right now, I started to identify big picture. What of the we're at the stage right now where everybody's asking, what are these jobs of the future? What are these skills of the future? So generally, there's an awareness in terms of, yes, you need thinking skills, problem-solving skills. You need.
The other one is, if I can suggest, right? So by clear on which sector and what's the new job, but also helping people today, where I am, to learn that 1 or 2, 3 new skills. Because I think the concern is also that, wow, this is so big, data, digital.
Yeah.
Susah sangat lah,
Yes.
But we need to help the Malaysians to say, actually, it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
There's 2 or 3 steps.
That's right.
3 months to get there.
Yeah.
There was a program that I think Tan Sri Azman Mokhtar mentioned last Friday, the Corporate Development Corporation that they did to help Malaysia Airlines, the 6,000 people who were released, how to retrain them. And he was saying something like 4,000 to 5,000 were back employed. So I think we need to help people through that journey, more so now, because I think it's just too noisy. And the other thing I'm concerned about is mental health, because I think people are unfortunately giving up hope. And that to me is a big concern.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Part of the pivot that we're going through right now, as not just here but everywhere, is the realization that, you see, before, 20 years ago, you think that the degree is what gets you the job.
Absolutely.
But it's no longer the case. It's the skills. And many corporations have actually started to realize this and started to have their everything from making sure that they invest in their own skills program. So companies like AirAsia and Tenaga, for example, have got their training arms, but they've also started to open it up to outside so that others can benefit for this as well.
But not too many PLCs are that endowed. So the few that we're working with are looking at how do I survive this period, and therefore skills that are not needed, what do I do with them? So I think there is a need to help those who are being released from the organization to help them to journey towards the next
Absolutely.
spot. Yeah.
Absolutely. What sort of questions from from an SME? I think the challenge is actually even bigger on the SME side because the company is smaller, and so how do you continue to run your company at the same time learn and skill?
Well, I think SME being smaller, right, they are actually even more nimble than large corporations, right? They are smaller teams, and then one person have to do the job of a few other people, right? In terms of skill set, I think I read in one of the WEF forum, right, 65% of the primary school students in the world, right, are studying for a subject that will be obsolete, right, or not relevant to them when they come up to work. Right? This is a reality across the world, right? What we are studying right now, even at the university level, right? By the time they graduate, it's obsolete, right? But one thing about the fourth industrial revolution, technologies like AI, IoT, a lot of the resources to study, frameworks, programming especially, are all open source, right? If you have the time, obviously, and you have obviously the desire to learn and continuous learning, right? I think anyone with a basic degree is able to master some of these technologies in 1 or 2 years, right? In terms of Malaysia context, the other problem I think probably everyone knows is brain drain.
Yeah.
Right? We're still having that right now, right? I think a point of fact, right? One of my friends, it's from Penang. He actually heading now one of the our neighbor agency that is piloting autonomous buses, right? Driverless buses. And they actually did a pilot. I think they have rolled out in one of the resorts they have right now, right? He's a Malaysian, right? But he's been in Singapore for quite a number of years. I think the government needs to solve the brain drain. I think MDEC is doing a great job, especially MDEC. We are part of the MDEC DTAP program. Maybe Surina can elaborate more, right? Because with the DTAP program, you have certain verticals, right? AI, big data, IoT. So we actually sit on the board that advises the universities selected by MDEC on the curriculum.
Yeah.
Right? Some of them are, again, Ms. Rai can elaborate on that.
So DTAP stands for Digital Transformation Acceleration Program, and it's really one of our efforts to impart know-how to the companies in terms of how you go about making this change and doing this digital leap. But brain drain certainly is something that we all need to think about. And I really do think that it's not just a government thing that needs to help solve this, but companies itself, because people, you provide the opportunity.
Exactly.
So it's private sector provides that opportunity. If the private sector is not paying enough, I mean,
exactly,
and you'll go away because these so that's certainly a consideration.
Yeah.
Now, what advice? So when you think about skills, you think about talent. It's really where we are right now. So this morning we talked about infrastructure, but all that is not going to be as effective without know-how. So skills, know-how is really important. Now, practical advice. Practical advice for if you are CEO of a company or a C-suite, how do you impart this know-how to your team? And similarly, if you're running a small business, practically speaking, like what are the action steps that you can take now? How do we navigate this change, and how do we get ourselves ready for what's next?
The best way is to get exposed so that your mindset gets opened up and changed. So sessions like this is very useful. So well done to Bursa. Send people for training, send people to go for a symposium to look at how IoT is being used, how AI is being used. Joint collaboration sessions with others in the same sector. I think the telcos were talking about it. So open your mindset. I've got a couple of clients who actually went to China to visit some of the players there spend 2-3 days. And this is not management, these are board members. And they come back and say, wow. So for a long time, we're trying to convince this particular client, a very traditional business, to make that change. They went and visited Huawei and came back, Chow, let's talk, right? Because that's opening up the mindset to the possibilities. I think that's the biggest thing that anyone can do. Don't have to visit if you are constrained on budget, and especially with COVID-19, you can't do that. There's always YouTube, but open your mindset to consider the possibilities.
Possibilities, really, really important. Yeah. James, any thoughts?
I think leadership in the organization is very important, right? The leader needs to be aware, obviously, open in mind to all these technologies, and also sort of like identify employees within their organization, right? Obviously, the shortest route is just import talent from another organization or another country, right? That would be a shortcut. But I've seen a lot of, failures on that, because that outsider will not have the visibility of what's happening within the organization.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And also the leader needs to give a free rein to the team he has selected to run the pilots, or even to come up with a new business initiative.
Excellent.
So it sounds, if I could recap, so some practical advice. So there's 4. So number 1, it starts with exposure.
Yep.
So really need to open your mind. And so it has to be intentional as well. It's not going to happen by itself. So things like, let's go out and do a visit, send people to forums, really to get that exposure, arrange idea exchange. So exposure is really important, number 1. Number 2, always think possibilities. Because the thing with digital tech innovation, most of the time people start to think about the risks. So I hear this thing,
all the problems.
All the problems. Hey, safer, cybersecurity and all that. True, but in the realm of technology, we have to always remember that there will always be risks.
Yes.
Always be risks. So it's really all about managing those risks. So, but lead with the possibilities. That's number 2. You said 3, leadership. Leadership needs to be active and really drive. And 4, make sure that you know who your change agents are.
Absolutely.
Who are your change agents? And then finally, you touched on it in the first question I asked, experiment. So it's really all about doing. You can't just wait. You just have to start. You just have to go. You have to try.
Jangan mahal-mahal lah, short one, 2-3 weeks, 1 month. You try and fail, so that you can improve very quickly.
Yeah. So good. Now let's talk about, I feel like some of the things that we talked about so far is really dealing with the here and now. COVID really has been the push to wake everybody up to say, yes, all this, it's not optional. You need to go digital, you need to change, you need to think about skills, upskill, reskill, etc., etc. But considering that this morning we talked about infrastructure, talked about 5G, and the title of our panel is Industry Revolution 4.0, I want to talk for a second and ask, how would you explain, what is this Industry Revolution 4.0? What is this? What's next? The fancy schmancy stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from you, James.
The IoT, 5G, what is this? How do you explain this? How do you explain IoT to your grandmother?
So basically, if you just Google Industry Revolution 4.0, all right, it's actually a term came out by Dr. Klaus Schwab, right, the founder of WEF, I think in 2016 in one of the forum. Right, basically the concept is that we move from Industry 1.0 using steam power to Industry 2 using factories, right, with the Model T Ford, electricity. Industry 3, which is technically happening now with the advance of internet and computers. We are moving to the 4th one, right? Some say it's happening now, right? Yes. I think you've heard about Sophia, right? The first artificial intelligence and robot that's giving a citizenship, right? We've learned about blockchain and things like that, all right? I think one of the difference between the 4th industrial revolution and what happened previously, right, is the amount of innovation technology coming together, right, at a very fast rate and depth, right? This has created a new sort of like a way of doing business, services,
Absolutely.
and it also created some new problems, right? I think during one of the forums in WF, they talk about UBI, universal basic income, which is already happening now because of COVID, right? Citizens are given money, right? So basically, it will change a lot of things, all right, across the board, right? Not only B2B services, but B2C or C2C, right? For those techies who have paid attention, I think a couple of months back, Elon Musk, right? Iron Man, right? Our real Iron Man. Actually, I have a startup called Neurolink, which actually is developing a brain-to-computer interface, right? Basically, they will connect a computer to your brain and read your thoughts. So what are implications? So now we are going, through apps and search for things we want to buy. So in the not too distant future, you can just think the product will arrive carried by drones probably in less than half an hour. Right?
Be careful what you think.
Right. So basically you think, I was thinking about this a couple of minutes back.
Yeah.
Right? And we are no longer tethered to our smartphones. Right? It's the chip is inside our brain.
Yeah. So I think one way of explaining it is that it's a continued evolution that's based on connectivity.
Yes.
Because now we talked about the connectivity is everything is connected. You can get access to things pretty fast because it's connectivity. But layer on top of that intelligence.
Yes.
Because now you've got data, you've got so intelligence that allows you to exchange information, which drives innovation and creates a better society all around. So that's my
That's very good.
definition.
Very
So
simple.
it's connectivity plus intelligence and innovation. Yeah. So I lost my train of thought there. So let's talk about sectors.
Okay.
Okay. So, because one of the questions here was, what we're talking about is quite broad.
Yes.
We're talking about future advanced technologies, opportunities for Malaysia. What do you think are some of the sectors where is our opportunity really? As a country, what sectors can we really, leapfrog, if you will, and assert a dominant position? What's the opportunity for us?
I like the program that MDEC started on Shared Service Center. So I was having a conversation with one of the CEOs of a GLIC recently, and he mentioned two examples. One is a company called Steelcase. Steelcase is based in US, Grand Rapids, and they make furniture and all that. Their research and engineering center is here in KL, capitalizing on the MSc status, using Malaysians, and very proudly Malaysians who graduate from UiTM and the local universities. So there's another example that the person mentioned. Another GLIC has owned a company based in US, and again the engineering innovation center is here in KL, again utilizing Malaysians to do it. So if you ask me, there are opportunities for us to do the same as Shared Service Center, but in the digital space, leveraging off that strength that we have. What's the strength? Talent. Yes, I mentioned earlier the challenges with talent, but still we've got a good set of talent. You mentioned your friend in Singapore, how I wish he's here to help us, right? So, but we've got a good set of talent. We also got a good set of organizations like MDEC who goes out and approach organizations like this to come in. So I think if we can think of where we can differentiate, so of course we want to have our own unicorns, but is that the battleground? I'm not sure. I think every country has its own strengths and weaknesses, and I think the examples that MDEC has built on these BPO centers and shares, I think that's a potential for us to leapfrog.
No, I think in terms of verticals, Malaysia is a blessed country, right? We have oil and gas, natural resources, even gold, right? We probably have able to have training grounds, right, to roll out projects or applications in almost all verticals, from agriculture, agtech, to oil and gas, process industries, smart cities, and so forth, right? We might not have the mass, but we could be the leader, right, in actually working on all these verticals. In fact, I think we've been approached by the Embassy of Argentina, right, some time back, right? We actually shared some thoughts about IoT development, right? Argentina, I think their vertical is agriculture. But for Malaysia, I think, even you asked me to pick three: agriculture, big potential, smart cities, and also smart manufacturing to a certain degree. In fact, we have actually two members who are from the glove industries that has actually accelerating their investment in IoT and AI, right, despite the pandemic, right? Because the glove industry is highly laborious, right? They need to automate a lot of the processes.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's about applying digital,
Absolutely.
adopting digital.
Absolutely.
Adopting digital. One area, coming back to industries, that I'll just share, another strength of ours, is on the creative side.
Yes, exactly.
Digital creative content. I mean, we are actually a very, very, very creative, ideas, arts. We're actually really good at that. And we actually have a lot of, coming back to talent that is really thriving in this space. I certainly do think that that's an opportunity.
Very good.
Well
done.
Well done, all of us. But there's still a lot more work ahead, and I really do think we're just starting to. We need to. Of course, there will be challenges. It's not easy. There are many days where I feel I'm doing this again.
Yes.
But if we
don't give up.
We continue to build maintain the momentum, and manage all the risk, and doing it all together, because really this is a time where private sector really needs to continue to drive. I think panel 2 just now said that, making sure that we've got the right infrastructure around us, and we can continue to build from here on.
Yeah, very good.
So we've come to the end of our time for this morning. I hope those tuning in got some good insights from here. There's always risks, there's always challenges, but we need to always be mindful of the opportunities and roll up our sleeves, because the devil's in the details, and
Execute.
from here. It's all about execution, right? Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Well done.